Good evening. My name is Ann Chow. I'm a founding member and chair of Asia Society's Women's Leadership Series Steering Committee. The series is designed to engage, inspire, and empower women by learning from women leaders around the world and locally. It is a celebration of diverse women who have made significant impact in society, and it is also a platform to generate interesting and important conversations. We thank you for tuning in tonight for the final program in Year 5 of the Women's Leadership Series. The program is titled Stepping Up and Giving Back, Uplifting Stories of Women Responding to COVID-19. During these times of uncertainty and crisis, we hope that the heartwarming stories we'll hear tonight will bring solace and cheer and strengthen our bonds to one another. We would like to express our deepest gratitude to our title sponsor, Bank of America, to our presenting sponsors, ExxonMobil, Nancy Paula Guimé, and Albert Chow. We also want to thank our many generous lead sponsors, additional sponsors, and special friends advancing the mission of our Women's Leadership Series. And special thanks go to members of the Women's Leadership Series Steering Committee who serve as our guide and inspiration for these programs. Before we introduce our speakers and moderator, let's reflect on the past 4 years' program through this short video.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Barksdale, and I'm a Senior Vice President with Bank of America. I'm also honored to be a member of the Women's Leadership Series Steering Committee. It is our distinct honor at Bank of America to be the title sponsor of Asia Society's flagship Women's Leadership Series, which is committed to gender equality and has been recognized as a global leader in the successful development of women in the workplace. Over the past few weeks, we have all come together, both our company and our country, with an intensified passion for racial equality. The incredibly tragic deaths of George Floyd and others, and the disproportionate impact of the health and humanitarian crisis on Black and brown people in their communities has created a new sense of urgency now, and we're prepared to take action. We at Bank of America are building on our long-standing work and have announced a $1 billion 4-year commitment to advance racial equality, economic opportunity, and healthcare initiatives. A vital way our company continues to drive sustainable and meaningful progress is through open and honest dialogue with each other on important topics such as inclusion and equality and the barriers to achieving them. We've spent a great deal of time on this, and we will do more, organizing courageous conversations with each other, clients, community members, and leaders. The key to these conversations is how they've helped us all to learn, to build understanding, and to drive needed change through our company, programs, and policies. Asia Society Texas Center has been at the forefront of raising awareness for women and celebrating their accomplishments. The Women's Leadership Series honors women who have made a considerable impact in society, both locally and globally. As you saw in the video, the series highlights diverse female leaders building connections and empowering future leaders. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for tonight. Barbara Bronstein is founder and president of Second Servings, which was founded 5 years ago to tackle the staggering rate of food insecurity and food waste in Houston. When COVID-19 struck, Second Servings was on the front line, rescuing valuable perishable food from disrupted hotels, business cafeterias, restaurants, and schools, and serving it to Houstonians in need. Kat Wynn is a local sommelier who has created a number of award-winning wine programs for casual all the way to fine dining restaurants in the Houston area. When COVID-19 hit, she partnered with a friend to create Houston Shift Meal, whose mission is to provide meals to those employees who have been laid off or furloughed in the restaurant and hospitality industry, as well as supporting local restaurants. Helen Wynn attended the Institute of Culinary Education and trained with Michelin star chefs. Though trained in classic French, Vietnamese comfort food is where her heart resides. Her restaurant, Saigon Social, was slated to open earlier this year, but was impacted when COVID-19 struck, so she had to pivot and go to deliveries instead. But she wanted to make a difference and help those most impacted by COVID-19, so she partnered with not-for-profits, Frontline Foods, Off Their Plate, and Heart of Dinner to deliver meals to healthcare workers and those most vulnerable in our community, such as seniors. Moderating our program tonight is Nilofer Malavi, who leads PwC's global and U.S. energy practice, serving energy clients in the oil and gas space. She also has served as PwC's Chief Diversity Officer and is a member of the Women's Leadership Series Steering Committee. We hope you enjoy the program tonight.
Thank you, Anne, for the introduction of the Women's Leadership Series. And thanks, Lisa, for the very kind introduction of our panelists here today. We would also like to thank ConocoPhillips, who's the newest presenting sponsor of our Women's Leadership Series. This pandemic has impacted every community in some way. And today, ConocoPhillips has donated $1.3 million in relief aid to help communities fight this virus. We've been touched by how many of our corporate partners, including Bank of America, ExxonMobil, and ConocoPhillips, have responded to our community's needs during this pandemic. Before we begin the discussion, I just wanted to let the audience know that following our conversation, we will be taking some questions from all of you. So please share those questions throughout the discussion via the Facebook and YouTube comment box. So without further ado, I am so honored to be moderating the panel today. You are going to be so inspired by the stories of these women and what they have done and how they have really risen during a pandemic to help the communities that they're all serving. Barbara, I'm going to come to you first and ask you to tell us a little bit about why you founded Second Servings to begin with, how you pivoted during the pandemic, and what motivated you to actually do that. And I know it's not your first time doing this, so we just love to hear your story.
Thank you for that introduction. I basically hated seeing good food go to waste at banquets due to last-minute no-shows. The food was prepared and paid for and in the kitchen, but I came to find out that it was generally being thrown away. And I knew there were plenty of Houstonians in need of food. So I called the food bank, and unfortunately, I was very disappointed to learn that they don't handle prepared food. They don't accept it. So I dug a little deeper to make sure it was legal to donate cooked food, and discovered that the government actually encourages businesses to donate food by protecting food donors who donate in good faith from liability. So I conducted extensive research and found that food rescue is going on all over the country, but it just wasn't happening in Houston. So I consulted with a lot of experts in food service, in social services, the legal field, the health department, and about 20 other food rescue organizations. And after a year-long pilot program, I founded Second Servings as Houston's only prepared and perishable food rescue organization. We pick up unsold and unserved food from more than 250 food donors, such as distributors, retailers, and manufacturers, and deliver it directly at no cost to 90 local charity sites, including soup kitchens, homeless shelters, low-income housing, day centers, and many others. We do this day in and day out, rain or shine, in refrigerated vans with paid drivers, assisted by a volunteer that rides in the second seat of each van. And with 16% of Houstonians being food insecure before COVID and 30 to 40% of the available food supply going to waste, food rescue makes a lot of sense. It's practical and very efficient. But when COVID struck, the food supply chain was dramatically disrupted. We worked very long hours to rescue nearly $10 million worth of food, which was 2 to 3 times the normal amount. And we rescued it from both established and new donors, including hotels, business cafeterias, lots of schools, the convention center, the sports venues, and restaurants that were suddenly forced to close, and events were forced to be canceled. So ordinarily, when we go to their kitchens to pick up the food, it's bustling with activity. But in this case, there was usually only one person who was in the kitchen charged with clearing out all the perishable food. It was really very sad. And that's the point at which I knew we had to do more. And so we quickly created what has become Houston's largest mass meal relief program, known as Dinners on Us. We reached out to our longstanding food donor and supporter, Hess Corporation, which jumped at the opportunity to help our community through Second Servings. And they are donating the services of their food services team to prepare family-friendly meals with ingredients that Second Servings is purchasing for the very first time from another long-standing donor, supporter and donor, Cisco. So the meals that Hess Corporation is packing are microwavable boxes that provide 8 servings of hearty comfort food, and they're frozen for the safest distribution.
Thank you, Barbara. It warmed my heart because I always wondered what happened to all that food, right? When we left the banquet and event, and it was so great to hear what you've done in this city to ensure that that food's not going to waste and going to a really good cause, and to watch how you've expanded during COVID, right? Serving the entire city is amazing. I want to go to Kat next, and I know that you and Kat are no strangers. You partnered, in fact, a lot of Kat, I think what you're doing now with Houston Shift Meals came out of the partnership that you and Barbara had after Harvey. And so tell us a little bit about Houston Shift Meals. You call it the pop-up nonprofit, and I love that term, right? I've never heard that before. So tell us a little bit about why you started what you did and what you've been doing to support the community.
Okay, so after Harvey, Houston got hit really hard after Harvey, and a group of friends and I got together and realized that we could help the community right away, well before the government or anyone, FEMA, Red Cross can step in. We called each other. That Houston has such a tight-knit restaurant community. We called each other, and any restaurant that didn't have power, we went and rescued food and product from their restaurants, took them to the restaurants that had power, and turned product into meals and food and delivered to homeless shelters and first responders like as soon as possible. And that, when we started Midtown Kitchen Collective, we realized that we could be stronger together. And so that started this whole idea of one collective reaching out to the community and getting donations, and then funneling those donations, whether it be goods or monetary donations, back out to the restaurants to help the restaurants extend their reach to help more people. Everyone wants to help during times of crisis. It's just a matter of how, and having someone organize it and be able to be effective and efficient. So taking what we learned, my co-founder of Houston Shift Meal, Jonathan Beitler, and we actually met during Harvey. We took that idea and applied it to Houston Shift Meal by basically saying, if we can get the donations and we can get the funds to help restaurants provide free meals for their staff as well as their neighbor staff, we'd be able to help feed this industry that actually fed all of Houston during Harvey. So we reached out to the public and got monetary donations, and we got funds from different suppliers and brands and wineries and spirits and just companies, anyone and everyone that wanted to help the out of work hospitality servers or hospitality workers. And we partnered up with some 30 odd restaurants all over Houston to ask them to provide free meals and meal kits to out of work workers, and people would come to the distribution centers and pick up meals and sometimes a bottle of wine or sometimes a 6-pack of beer or something like that. And it just kind of helped them feel normal again. And also that was one less thing that they had to worry about. We're talking about an industry that, is without a safety net. And during the restaurant ban, like, everyone was all of a sudden out of work and, wondering where their next meal was coming from or how they were going to pay their bills or rent or all of this stuff. And so we decided that we would at least feed them. We can help them with one less thing to worry about. So that was how Shift Meal started.
Kat, such an impact on the community. I remember hearing so many stories, especially of, again, employees in the restaurant industry that for the first time, right, had to find ways and means to feed their families. And so the fact that you were able to support them during such a difficult time is fantastic. And speaking of restaurants, Helen, you chose to open a new restaurant in the middle of the pandemic. And so you were going through a very challenging time, obviously personally, but that didn't seem to faze you. And you took that and turned it into an opportunity to give back to the community. So I know you were scheduled to open sometime in March. You put the brakes on that as a result of the outbreak, and found an avenue to support your neighbors and then expand it beyond that. So would you mind just sharing how all that came together and what that experience has been like for you?
So we were supposed to open on the 13th of March, which was the day that the very first mandate took into effect. And at 50% occupancy, I was just thinking about, I don't know, I had an inkling that there was going to be a lot more changes to come. And so I made the decision of just putting the brakes on the opening just to see how things were going to progress in the coming days. And within a few days, there was the ban on the restaurant. And what seemed like within 12 hours, I had to lay off all of the employees that I had just hired. It was a incredibly, probably the most challenging thing for me is just being able to tell people that, or having to tell people that they no longer have a job. And so I remember us making a really big family meal, and I just told my staff to take as many things as they can, just to hold over for the next few days as we all sit and wait to see how what the new regulations were going to be, and how this virus was affecting the community. And I didn't really have a plan, but I knew that opening was definitely not the plan. So after closing the restaurant, I'd stayed back for a couple of days and was just trying to process, because it took me 2 years just to find the location and sign the lease. And then we went through a lot of struggles with just trying to obtain a new gas line, and that took 11 months. And we literally had gas for about 2 weeks, and then we had to shut down. So I fell into a minor depression for about a day or two, where I just needed to be alone. And I was cooking in the kitchen at the restaurant, and I would get knocks on the door, and it would be our neighbors from the apartments upstairs and just people that were living in the community. They were asking if we were open and if they could purchase any meals, and whatever it is that I had cooked that day, I would offer it to them. And I think it was on the third day I decided to just open up the takeout window and post a little announcement on Instagram to see, who we would be able to feed. And from there, I was thinking it'll probably be at most 10 people, but the outpour of support from the community was so overwhelming that by the end of the first week, I was able to hire back one of our staff members, and from there, another member. And by the end of the second week, we were approached by a few nonprofits who had learned about our efforts and asked if we would be willing to partner with them. The two organizations were Frontline Foods as well as Off Their Plate. And so essentially what they did was they would give us a budget per meal for us to cook these warm comfort meals to deliver to the frontline workers. And with that, I was able to bring back somewhat of a full staff temporarily. And I think it really just gave us a whole new purpose. And that kind of just snowballed into this really big operation, and we just became a community kitchen.
Helen, what an amazing story. And I promised the audience we're going to get three amazing women sharing their stories, and we're off to a great start to be able to really pivot so quickly, right, after a setback to help the community, to help those frontline workers is fantastic. And you talked about the community stepping up in your case. And Barbara, I want to go back to you maybe with a question around how have you seen, our community step up? And I'm sure there are some maybe things you've seen, whether it's from your employees, you talked about a number of donors, reactions from those who you've been supporting, if you could share any stories with us.
Well, we have an incredible team of part-time drivers and a small office staff, and everyone stepped up to help out, because we had to have some of our drivers had to step back, but the others stepped up to take their hours. So that was incredible. And we also had help from about 100 volunteers, many new volunteers assisting either with our daily van delivery routes or the Dinners on Us meal distributions that we conducted twice weekly downtown. So, and as the community found out about our meal distributions, we received very generous support that enabled us to expand our program from initially the hospitality workers, including ticket takers at sports venues, housekeepers at hotels, restaurant servers, and others in Houston and Galveston. But the support from foundations, from corporations, and from individuals was incredible. And we were able, by a few weeks later, April 23rd, to expand to all Houstonians in need. And to this day, we've already distributed 65,000 prepared meals, and we'll keep going as long as the need is there and we have support from our resources.
Well, one thing that we have seen in Houston for sure after Harvey is how the community comes together to support each other. And so, Kat, if I can go back to you, as you think about your efforts here during COVID-19, how is that different, or even maybe similar to the experience you had during Harvey as you were supporting the community?
With Harvey, we were able to take on volunteers. We had hundreds of volunteers at one point, just like sandwich line, assembly line style. We actually took over this former homeless shelter in Midtown, and we had, families coming in, bringing their kids, and it's something that everyone can do. And there was this coming together. But with the nature of the pandemic, we couldn't do that. We want everyone to be social distanced and trying to be safe. So we actually had to go back to the drawing board and have the restaurants, each of our restaurants had to use their own crew. All of our restaurants had their own agency. They were in charge of portion control. We had to set all of these guidelines out. I put out a document that basically set all of the guidelines on how everything was supposed to work. And fortunately, most of these restaurant owners and chefs already know me, and they know how bossy I can be. And they understood like what we were able to communicate exactly what we were looking for. And so when we put the word out, and we leaned so hard on social media to put the word out to the public on where the events were going to be held. We used Facebook and Instagram, and we set up our own website to gather to gather restaurants and donations, but to put the word out there on where people were supposed to go, we leaned on social media. The differences, people, that was really the big difference, that we couldn't actually be so hands-on. We had to use the tools that we had, and like social media and just news media in general, to get the word out there. But for Harvey, it was just so much easier because like you had word of mouth. I don't think that with the COVID crisis, people were able to connect as easily unless it was, just using social media. So we didn't have any volunteers. We tried to make sure that we actually, okay, that's not true. We had myself and my partner in this, Jonathan Beitler, and like maybe 4 other volunteers that actually helped us distribute out of one location. But all of the other locations really was each restaurant having their own crew and handling their own events. So we turned into more of like a connection, like a network platform of information rather than a hands-on direct like organization.
Well, I'm sure, I can't even imagine, right? A volunteer organization that can't really have all the volunteers they would want, right, to do all the things. And I know Barbara mentioned that too, right, in terms of having to limit and be very cautious and careful in terms of how you carried out, right, all of your efforts in the community without, in obviously a safe manner. So kudos, honestly, to all of you. Um, Helen, I want to go back to you because you talked about how you were supporting, obviously, your neighborhood and then the frontline workers, right, that you were feeding. But this next story really touched my heart because you talked about, I think there's a nonprofit called Heart of Dinner. And they were not only, working with you to provide dinner to seniors, but also handwritten notes, right, to those in Chinatown who were isolated, who did not have an opportunity for all the reasons we know to be interacting with people. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so a couple weeks into our community operation, one of my friends, chef partner over at Kopitiam, a Malaysian restaurant, just a couple blocks down in our neighborhood, had reached out, and she had mentioned that a while back her partner Yin and her had started these dinners and these suppers where they would just provide food for the community, and they wanted to revive it. And uh, as as people were donating time and resources, they were really overwhelmed as to where to really center their efforts and the resources. And they had thought that, of all the people, the frontline workers were getting taken care of by all these larger nonprofit and a lot of donations, whereas the seniors were often forgotten because, for one, there was a huge language barrier, and two, they weren't very mobile. So even if they did know of a resource or a food center, they just weren't able to leave their community home, their senior home, or wherever it is that their home was set up. And so they had approached us and asked if we would be willing to just jump on as a first partner to see, if we can just commit to one senior home and provide a warm meal as well as some produce kits just to keep them afloat. And from that operation, we are now serving, I believe, over 10 senior homes. And beyond the meals, they had sent out an intention on social media, where they're like, we just decided to start writing little notes. And they had asked if I would be able to write some notes because there were some seniors in some of the homes that spoke Vietnamese, and I'm Vietnamese. And they said that it would be very, very nice and touching if they would just be able to receive a little note that just reminded them that there's people out there that's thinking about them and that care for them, and they're not completely isolated. And then the notes just kept coming in from people all over the world. I don't know what the exact count is of right now, but I think, as of right now, collectively, we've served over about 25,000 meals, and each meal kit comes with with a note, and most of the notes also now come with a drawing that people hand draw on these notes, and it's just incredibly touching. We've seen a lot of some of our restaurant partners have done the deliveries themselves, and they would take pictures and send us videos of just the deliveries, and just to be able to see how happy and how like their eyes light up when they receive these warm meals, it's just it's incredibly rewarding. And I get emotional just thinking about it, just because you think about all the things that's going wrong in the world right now, and just being able to make a difference in people who really need it. I think it's really what gets you up every morning to just go out and fight the good fight again.
It is great, Helen, to be able to sit back during truly a global crisis, and see these and hear about these amazing stories in humanity, right? And how people are touching other people's lives in big ways. Okay, so let's talk about something a little bit lighter, maybe your restaurant. So can you tell us, I mean, you've pivoted, you've been doing these amazing things. Tell us a little bit about the future of the restaurant. You've learned a lot, I'm sure, as you've gone through the challenges here recently that you've faced. So, what have you learned, and how are you making any changes as a result of that?
Yes, for us personally, in the last 2 months, on top of our regular takeout and delivery service, we reached over 10,000 meals for frontline workers, for communities, centers in needs, as well as our senior homes. And um, I decided to take a 10-day break just to reassess, only because from the start of the whole pandemic, this is being my first restaurant. I'm learning as I go, and I felt that everyone had an opportunity just to shut down, to reassess, and now they're slowly starting to open up. And I just kept on pivoting from one project to another, and I hadn't had a day off in like 7 months. So I figured it was time for me to just take a step back to figure out how we're going to proceed. And phase 2 started in New York this past Monday, which allows for outdoor dining. And so I'm trying to create a system where we can continue with business, all the while providing that safety and comfort to our staff members, as well as for diners to feel comfortable to return to the dining scene al fresco. Um, that's still kind of in the works right now. I don't know how that's going to pan out, or what the outcome is going to be. So we're still essentially taking it day by day and week by week, because I feel like all these regulations keep changing on a daily basis. And then not only that, but there's just been a resurgence of the spread of the virus. And so I'm very cautious as to, I don't want to rush into it, to have to shut down again in a week or 2 weeks time because of the effects of the virus. So we're just, this time around, I'm taking a little bit more time just so that I make sure that I take all the right precautionary steps to protect myself, my team, and also the community that do decide to come in and support us.
Well, Helen, I can't wait to be able to fly back to New York and come to your restaurant and enjoy an amazing meal. So, Kat, Helen talked about the reopening. We're sitting here in Texas, we're sitting in Houston. We had a pretty aggressive reopening effort. Unfortunately, the results today are not looking great. Maybe any thoughts around how long do you think, or have you thought about how long you may need to continue supporting the community, right? We're not back to 100%. Obviously, still a lot of people out of jobs. And then, we have a surge in cases today. Any thoughts from you on that?
Since the very beginning of Houston Shift Meal, we always said that as long as there was a need, and as long as, like Barbara said, as long as we have the support, we will continue to support the community. Jonathan and I put out a notice that said that we were pausing all of our events when we started seeing the spike. And as restaurants, when restaurants were able to get back up to 50%, we put out the information saying that we were pausing our events just in case we had to shut back down again. But we were continuing, and we have been continuing to receive donations through our nonprofit partner, the Texas Wine School. And they are still collecting for us so that we have the funds to pop back up as soon as the need arises again. If at this time, like, there are so many resources for people, like Houston Food Bank, Second Servings being a great one, that are available to Houstonians. So we'd like to reserve our resources for when hospitality industry specifically needs to reach back out. So because we ourselves are only dedicated to the hospitality industry. I wish that we had the ability to take care of everyone, but when we started this mission, our mission was to take care of the hourly employees and the employees that rely on tips that, again, don't have a safety net. So it's a hard question to answer because no one really knows what's going to happen. this is unprecedented for everyone. We don't know if businesses are going to have to shut back down again, or if we find a vaccine tomorrow. Who knows? But what I do know is that the need is still there, and as long as the need is there, we will do everything that we can to help those people, help our hospitality family.
Well, I hope you take this the right way, but I am really looking forward to putting your pop-up out of business, because that means we have really turned the corner and we don't need it anymore. And I don't often say that about a business.
Exactly. That's the whole thing. That was the whole comment about we're a pop-up nonprofit, and we're fortunate to have my friends over at the Texas Wine School allow us to use them, and they have allocated all of our funds. 100% goes right back to the restaurants, so we're able to support the restaurants during this time, because a lot of the restaurants are, as I'm sure you've seen, a lot of restaurants are worried about going out of business and how they're going to take care of their staff and stay in business. So yeah.
Thanks for that. I want to remind our audience, please submit your questions, because I'm going to go to audience questions here in a few minutes. But I want to ask a question actually to all three of you. And Barbara, I may come to you first on this. I know as you've gone through this experience with COVID-19, there have been lessons learned, right? That you've maybe personally learned as you pivoted. If you could share, what are those lessons, and is there anything that you are going to, do a little bit differently going forward with your organization as a result of maybe the efforts here recently?
I would say the lessons that I've learned are, one, to in the face of tremendous uncertainty, be willing to take some risk. It sounds like my compatriots here, Kat and Helen, have done exactly that. And I was fearful at the beginning, but I jumped right in, and it has paid off. And also, another lesson is to think creatively to solve what seems to be insurmountable problems. It's been something I've been a big advocate of. Think outside the box. It's more than an expression. It's really important to solve the problems.
And you've definitely done that. I as we were talking, I remember you sharing with me, thinking outside the box in terms of where are we going to get those, trucks and with coolers that we can use. Who's not using them today? Who's not using space? Who's not using their kitchens? How can we repurpose that? So that's great. Helen, can I go to you with that question next?
Sure. I think two things that have really resonated would be, first and foremost, just checking up on your neighbors, your friends, and your family. I know that sometimes, when you get so consumed with work and with life or your career or whatever the reason may be, you tend to forget, or you just don't have that time to just do that outreach. And oftentimes there's a lot of people within your inner circle that are going through a tremendous amount of adversities. And, I think sometimes just a phone call would truly make a tremendous difference in their life and their whatever their day is like, or what they're going through at the time. And as well as don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that sometimes there's just so much humility on both ends. And as you're going through things, you just need to realize that you're never really alone. And as you reach out to the community, like I've just realized that there's a lot of people who I've gained a lot of new friends, and a lot of I'd consider them family now, just because we're part of these different chat groups where we check up on each other on a weekly basis, and we share resources and make sure that we're doing our best to stay afloat, and we're keeping that open channel of communication, so that if anybody needed to just vent or just anything at all, we're there for each other.
it definitely has caused all of us to pause and think about a lot of things differently. Kat, can I go to you next on that?
Lessons learned on pivoting. Won't be flexible. I think the biggest lesson that I got out of this is something I kind of already knew about Houston, but never underestimate the heart of people, the generosity of people. So be tenacious and ask for it. Like Helen said, ask for help, because every time you reach out and people know that there are others in need, there's always going to be people that are willing to help, and restaurants and donors and people that will step up, whether they can donate their time or they can donate money or they can donate products. People are always wanting to help.
Yep. You won't know until you've asked. So
absolutely.
So we're starting to get some audience questions, so maybe I'll shift to those. We have some great questions coming in. The first one is from Paul, asking about how have traditional gender roles been altered in the era of COVID-19? What have you seen with that? I don't know if any of you want to take that one.
Gender hasn't come into play. People of all stripes and colors and shapes and sizes and sexual orientations have all been very helpful in the situation. So I would say that just the willingness to help, be it with volunteering, be it financial help, help comes in all different stripes and colors.
That is always good to hear. Everybody should be able to step in at a time like this and support each other. Anyone else want to add anything before I go to the next question? So, Kat, I'm going to come to you next. The next question is for you from Jenny. And it says, you made reference to being bossy, in quotes. As a lady who's seen you in action, she would argue
Hi,
that
Jenny.
you're confident, you're assertive, and you're effective. And so in the restaurant world, do you see descriptions like bossy or outspoken applied evenly between both genders?
No. No. I think that is something that we are getting better at. But I spent many years working in fine dining, and in my earlier years, spent many as a sommelier. It used to be such a good old boys club, and as an Asian female coming up in the early 2000s as a sommelier, it was not very common. So yes, I got a lot of, well, I ain't never seen an Asian sommelier before, or I've never, like, no, I don't want to talk to you. Send the sommelier over. I'm like, oh, well, that's me. Hi, how can I help? I think that this is a conversation I've had with some friends in the industry before. How we shift that is that we need to start recognizing that there's more room at the table than for just one woman. So if you are a woman that has a seat at the table, invite more women to sit down. I think that that's where we start. We start at the top and we start supporting each other better. I think that that's how we shift that mentality. But I will say, I mean, in the past 10 years, it's gotten so much better. I see so many boss babes out there that are just slaying and crushing and, kicking butt and taking names. Both in the wine world and restaurant world, in the front of the house and back of the house. And I think that we need to change the narrative and don't celebrate, like, don't say that they are, these professionals are great because they are women. These professionals are great and they are women. So I think that there are two different ways to celebrate, and two different ways to get that message across, but only one way actually celebrates the gender, rather than saying despite this crutch.
Very well said. I can't even top that. Helen, I'm going to go to you with the next question from Emma, who's talking about how we're seeing so much resistance by the public to wear masks. Yet, if we want to be able to open these restaurants back up, right, get people back to work, we need to be able to keep, obviously, infections down and follow the public health guidelines. So I guess that the question is, how do we address that in the community?
I believe, well, here in New York, it's mandatory when you're out in public to wear a mask. There's a lot of people that do come up to our takeout window, and we just politely ask them to take a few steps back if we're feeling that they're encroaching into our little 6 feet bubble. And for the most part, the response has been very positive, and people would either take the step back or just readjust their mask. We haven't really experienced any resistance. It seems that everyone that we've encountered through the window, as well as through the nonprofits that we work with, it's been a mandatory. It's a non-negotiable. So there hasn't been any resistance on our end.
Well, that's good to hear. I know many cities are now going to hopefully a little bit more of that mandatory mask environment. Next question, and I love this question from Mia, so thanks for sending it in. And it may be our last question, so I'm going to ask each of you to maybe respond to this. So Mia is asking, first of all, how are you doing emotionally? And do you find that the work that you're doing, giving back to the community, helps you deal with the pandemic? I know every single one of us, no matter who we are, what our situation is, has been emotionally impacted. And emotions have gone up and down probably throughout the past few months. So with that, Helen, maybe we'll start with you, and then I'll go to Barbara and Kat.
As you can see earlier, I have these little bouts of breakdowns just because it's a lot to deal with. I mean, when I'm in the kitchen, I'm a different person. And when I come home, it's like trying to disconnect. You try to be a different person too. And I think that I'm constantly finding things to do so that I can keep my mind and my body occupied as a deterrent to just staying up to date with what's going on and all the negative that's going on in the world right now. But it's been a roller coaster, and it's something that I'm learning to process and deal with on the daily, because I just feel like, there's one moment I'm here and the next moment I'm here, and it just doesn't stop.
Barbara?
What it's done to me is I worry a lot, but it's also given me a lot of satisfaction to know that we're helping the community. And we have such wonderful donors. I'll just mention one. Fresh Foods Catering is a local catering company, and they had their events canceled, but the owner called me to say that she felt so badly that she wasn't donating surplus from catered events because the events were canceled, but she asked her chef to make a dinner for 80 people, a complete dinner that she donated to Second Servings for one of our charity sites. So, she's struggling with her own business, but yet there's goodness out there like this. And she felt badly. Well, that says it all. I mean, as people are so generous and thoughtful, and that gives me reassurance that there's good out there, and it's it's something that we all have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and we manage the pain, but there's good out there.
Absolutely. Kat?
Sorry, Mike. How are we doing emotionally? Well, surviving, maybe not thriving, but surviving. I think my favorite response has been as well as can be expected, but through seeing how much good people are actually out there doing, how generous people have been, and the gratitude that people have shown when they are receiving a meal kit, a produce box, or it really is a great reminder on why most of us got into the hospitality business in the first place, because we want to take care of people. And I think that's the most gratifying thing of all. I had a story when we had interviewed a young lady, Brooke Betchel, who was talking to us about how we, as she put it, saved her life. She had been out of work for a while and had just started a new job right before the pandemic hit. And so she didn't qualify for unemployment. So when her restaurant shut down, like, she had to go and try to apply for food stamps and, whatever help she could get. But it took much longer than a stimulus check or, and she, with her dietary restrictions, she was vegan and gluten-free. Or no, she wasn't gluten-free, she's vegan. And she said that that the produce boxes and the meal kits that we were offering really just like brought her back to life, like made her feel human again. And she, was able to, cook and survive off of these boxes. And when she was telling me the story, it just like was overwhelming. And it was a great reminder of, like, the love that people have for each other. And I think that's what's, really going to get us through all of this, is as long as we keep remembering to see and focus on that good.
Thanks. Okay, one last rapid fire question for all of you, because our audience has been touched by your stories, and they want to know, what is a specific thing that the community can do to support your efforts? So each of you, Kat, I'll start with you.
If you'd like to contribute to Houston Shift Meal, please visit houstonshiftmeal.com. There's a donate button there, but also please check on our website. All of our restaurant partners are on our website, and please go and support those restaurants, because those restaurants are the ones that have literally been working hours on end and trying to keep things together with a roll of duct tape and a prayer. But still, yet they are willing and wanting to help the community. So please support those restaurants and tag them on social media.
Thanks, Kat. Helen, what can the community do for you?
I think Heart and Dinner has grown to be very near and dear to me. I'd say look them up, and if you can, contribute whatever resources, or if you really enjoy writing, or you have great penmanship, or even if you don't, like, just write a note, send it in, and we can attach it to our weekly meal deliveries for the seniors.
Thank you. And Barbara?
Ditto on the financial support, which helps us pay our drivers, make our deliveries, and purchase food for the Dinners on Us program, which will continue for quite some time. So check out our website. You could also volunteer in the future to ride in our vans. You'll always be amazed at the beautiful food and the quantity and the quality of what we pick up every day and deliver. So I thank everyone for listening and for contributing. and doing their part. Thank you.
Well, I can't believe that our hour is already up. We could be talking for much longer. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you, Helen, Barbara, and Kat, for everything that you're doing and sharing your heartwarming stories with our viewers today. So to conclude the program, I would like to invite Monica to say a few words. Again, thanks to the audience.
Good evening. My name is Bonna Cole, and I serve as the president of Asia Society Texas Center. We have missed seeing all of you at the center. Amidst this global pandemic and recent events, we believe it is even more critical to lift inspirational stories and highlight the positive contributions being made during these challenging times. On behalf of Asia Society, I would like to thank Nilofer and our guest speakers, Barbara, Kat, and Helen, for sharing their heartfelt stories with us. We hope you enjoyed the program. We look forward to the day when we can again welcome you in person at the Asia Society. Until then, we wish you safety and well-being.